Good morning. Want to look today, if you could turn to Daniel chapter 4, and how God can work with the proud and bring them down and humble them. This is a terrific story here. And actually in the book of Daniel, this is you get the impression. I get the impression that this is Nebuchadnezzar talking in this chapter. Now you'll have to read the whole chapter because I've got to jump down it a bit. But you'll get the theme. But I'm going to ask you if the end of this is terrific. The end of the story is terrific. So bear with me. You'll enjoy this. So we'll start at verse 1. Not at verse 1. We'll start, at verse 4, sorry. So here we are in Daniel 4, verse 4. Nebuchadnezzar was at ease in my house and flourishing in my palace. So this was a mighty, mighty king who conquered land after land. He wasn't a Christian, from a Babylonian king, and I say it was what they done was unbelievable. The amount of land they conquered. They destroyed Jerusalem. They took Israel captive for 70 years, saying it was God working because of the disobedience of the children of Israel. The lot was taken in to Babylon, and you're going to see Daniel here coming out. Daniel was sort of more or less an interpreter of dreams. He was the head man in this office. So here we are here. It says at verse 5, it says, I had a dream and it frightened me. Now, he was scared of his wits of this dream. It stuck with him. While I was in my bed, the images and visions of my mind alarmed me. So this is a king who could do anything, in charge of anything. He was frightened and he was alarmed at this dream that he had. So what he done, he called all the wise men together so they could interpret this dream, and they were unable to do it. They couldn't make an interpretation of it at all. But finally, verse 8, finally Daniel named Belshazzar after the name of my God. So we'll call him Daniel, his proper name. And the spirit of the holy gods is in him, came before him, and I told him the dream. So if you're brought before King Nebuchadnezzar, you had to be careful what you said. With just one wrong word, and this guy was all powerful, and it says here, it says, Belshazzar, Daniel, head of the diviners, because I know you have a spirit of the holy gods, and no mystery puzzle to you. Explain me the visions of my dream that I saw, and interpret it. In the visions of my mind, I was lying, and this is what he saw. So he goes on to here, he talks about this big tree that he's seen that was very great and very tall. And this dream, it grew very large, and it was reached the sky, and it was visible to all the ends of the earth. The leaves on it were beautiful, and its fruit was abundant, and there was fruit for all on it. And the wild animals found shelter under it, and the birds of the air lived in its branches, and the creatures fed from it. So this is so far the dream's pleasant, And it goes on to say in verse 13, I was lying in my bed, and I also saw the visions in my mind and observed a holy one. Wow. So what was this holy one? This was an angel coming down from heaven, and he called out loudly, chop down the tree, chop off its branches, strip off its leaves, and scatter the fruit, and let the animals free from under it, and the birds on its branches, and leave the stump with its roots on the ground, and with a band of iron and bronze around it, in the tender grass of the field. Let him be drenched with dew from the sky, and share the plants of the earth and with the animals. Let his mind be changed to that from a man. Let him give him the mind of an animal for a period of 7 times. Now, this is not good. There's no wonder he was frightened and he was scared, And it says here that this word by decree of the observers, and the matter is commanded from the holy ones. This is now the living will know that the most high ruler of men over the kingdom of men, he wants to give it to anyone he wants, and he sets it to the lonely men. So he gives the dream to Daniel, and for Daniel to interpret it, So he goes on to say that he's frightened of his wits of this dream, what's going to happen, And verse 19, then Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, was stunned for a moment, and his thoughts alarmed him. So Daniel here knew he was in front of a guy that could just blink and say the wrong thing. I'm sure Belshazzar heard nothing but praise about everything he'd done. Now Daniel's going to tell him something pretty nasty, which involves him. And, he was stunned for a moment, but Daniel knew to say the truth, and his thoughts alarmed him. And he said, and the king said, Daniel, don't let the dream or its interpretation alarm you. Daniel answered, my lord, may the dream apply to those who hate you, and its interpretation your enemies. So he goes on now to explain the dream that he had. The tree you saw, which grew large and strong, those top reached the sky and was visible to all the earth, whose leaves were beautiful and his fruit was abundant, and on the food for all, and the wild animals lived, and the branches and the birds in the air lived. That tree is you, the king. So Daniel's told him who the tree was. It's you, King Nebuchadnezzar. For you become great and strong, and your greatness has grown, and even reaches the sky, and your dominion extends over the ends of the earth. So this guy was big, this Nebuchadnezzar, this king, controlled a terrible lot, conquered a terrible lot, And the king saw an observer, a holy one, come down from heaven, saying, cut down the tree and destroy it, and leave the stump with its roots on the ground, with a band of iron bronze around it, and the tender grass of the field. Let him be drenched with dew in the sky, and share food with the wild animals for this period of 7 times. This is the interpretation, your majesty. This is a sentence of the Most High that has been passed against my Lord and King. So what he's saying is God's going to sort you out now. See, Nebuchadnezzar was full of pride and arrogance, and he thought he was a king's beast. He never think that. I look at some of the rulers of this earth, and they want to control everything, but really, God can humble the proud. And this guy was full of pride. He thought he was the bee's knees, And look what he says in verse 25. And this is Daniel still giving an interpretation of the dream. You will be driven away from the people to live with the wild animals, and you will feed on the grass like cattle, and be drenched with dew from the sky for 7 periods of time. Now they reckon that was 7 years. Until you acknowledge that the Most High is the ruler over the kingdom of men, and he gives it to anyone he wants. It's a pity people wouldn't realise that today, have the fear of the Lord, that he is in charge of this whole planet, from north to south, from east to west, and what's happening here, God is controlling it all. Man's not controlling it. God's behind it all, moving men as he wants to do, So he gives it to anyone he wants, as the command to leave its tree stumps with its roots, and your kingdom will be restored. Wee bit of hope here. So to you, as soon as you acknowledge that heaven rules, this is so sad that people today don't realise that heaven rules. God rules over everything. Therefore my advice seems good to you, my king. Separate yourself from your sins by doing what is right, and from your injustice by showing mercy to the needy. Perhaps there will be an extension of your prosperity. So there you are. Out Daniel walked after this. What an interpretation. It wasn't an interpretation of hope. It was an interpretation of repentance. Change what you're doing. And we tell people today that who are not saved that they need to be born again, that their religion won't help you. You need to have a relationship with Jesus. That's the lovely message of the cross, that Jesus died for you and for me, and he's the only way the only way you're going to get to heaven is through Jesus Christ, the Son of God. He was God himself. And people ignore the message. And this boy here, he ignored the warning that Daniel brought. He was going to ignore it. So what happened? Let's see what happened. Verse 28. All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar at the end of 12 months. Now, what a period of grace he had. 12 months, nothing happened. See, sometimes we think that, we get away with things with God. Well, you don't. At the end of 12 months, he was walking on the roof. This is King Nebuchadnezzar on the royal palace in Babylon. And the king exclaimed, "Is this not Babylon the Great, that I have built by my vast power to be a royal residence and to display my majestic glory?" Wow, what pride. What pride. Listen, the nails drove home here at this point. Look what happened at verse 31. While the words were still in the king's mouth, a voice came from heaven. King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is declared that the kingdom is departed from you. You will be driven away from the people to live with wild animals, and you will feed on the grass like cattle for 7 periods of time, until you acknowledge the Most High is ruler over the kingdom of men, and he gives it to anyone he wants. At that moment, the sentence against Nebuchadnezzar was executed. Wow. He was driven away from the people. He ate grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with dew from the sky, and his hair grew like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds of claw. Wow. I tell you, he was in a dire strait. Yeah. Now it's interesting to note that, as far as I know, there might have been several, Nebuchadnezzar 1, 2, and 3, but it's noticed in history, I think, that the generals, that Nebuchadnezzar disappeared for 7 years, and then he came back. So, and these generals looked after everything for him. Look at verse 34. But at the end of those days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, looked up to heaven, and my sanity returned to me. You see, God's in charge of everything. I know people get sick and ill and all this and that, but sometimes God can use the sickness and ill for his glory, Then I praised the Most High and honoured and glorified him who lives forever. You cannot stand in the face of God. Look what he says about him, about the Lord. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion. It's not pride now. And his kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are counted as nothing, and he does what he wants with the army of heaven and the inhabitants of the earth. Listen carefully. Please walk away with this in your heart today. If you're full of pride and arrogance and all this stuff, there is no one who can hold back his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" At that time my sanity returned to me, and my majesty and splendour returned to me, and the glory of my kingdom, and my advisers and nobles sought me out, and I was established over my kingdom. Even my greatness came to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and glorify the King of heaven, because all his works are true, and his ways are just. Listen carefully to this. He is able to humble those who walk in pride. That's some message there. Read that chapter. May the Lord bless you today. Bye.